Even after 20 years since the movie tie-in Spider-Man 2 game launched, it's still to this day quite impressive. It's got a massive open world for you to explore and swing around with fun side activities. Also, the story is actually pretty okay, with the original cast reprising their roles, albeit quite a mixed vocal performance. But most importantly, the physics-based swinging in this game is pretty much unmatched, with absolutely no limits on what you can do. But obviously, with emulation opening up the ability to play every single port of this game on PC, it means that finding out which one is going to give you the most definitive experience is not only frustrating, but time consuming. Therefore, I'm here to give you my take on what some of the best ways to experience this game are by going through the different versions and what mods and settings we can apply. Here on Retro Renew, I'm basically dedicated to everything techie related to enhancing and renewing older titles. So let's get to finding out what is the best way to play Spider-Man 2. But first, a word from our sponsor. We all love video games, but what's better than games is games at a fraction of the price, and that's exactly what you can do here on Instant Gaming. By far the best thing about Instant Gaming is that it's not your usual marketplace key site. All of the keys here are sourced directly by Instant Gaming themselves, therefore you never have to worry about getting a dodgy key, and also the keys are just delivered incredibly fast. But I know this from personal experience. I've been on this platform buying games since 2018 and I have not had a single issue. So if you're interested, use my affiliate link in the description to save yourself some money on great games whilst also supporting the channel. Let's get back to the video. Before we start, it's extremely important to know that I've researched and tested for myself what versions provide the best in terms of visuals, performance, and any content differences. But a lot of this is still subjective. I'm showing you my thoughts and opinions on what the definitive experience looks like for me, but that can be totally different for you. The best thing about the PC platform is that you get to choose the kind of experience you have. So this is just my take on what I think the best experience is. Therefore, take what you like about this video, leave what you don't. It's all up to you. Now let's first head into the PS2 version of the game running on the PCSX2 emulator. I'm sure many of you relate to me when I say that this was the version that I played as a kid, and it's the one that I have the most nostalgia for. But over the past few years, it's also been one of the hardest ones to emulate. Before PCSX2 got its 2.0 update, it used to basically not work at all unless you ran it in software mode. But we've come a long way from that, and now in its current form, it runs really well. We obviously can enhance it a lot from this native setting though, so my recommendation would be to first enable all of the patches for the game by going to the game properties menu, patches, and then for this game we have a widescreen and 60 FPS patch. Widescreen is a no-brainer, but for the 60 FPS one, you should use a little bit of caution here. Using it may introduce frame drops, stutters, and bugs. If you want to try it out though, I would recommend that you enable it and then go to Emulation tab and then set the EE cycle rate to 130% overclock or higher. You might also want to try setting this to 300%, but 130% is a decent baseline here. In terms of internal resolution, my recommendation is always to set this to whatever your display resolution is, so for me that's 1440p. The option is here though to go higher than your display resolution, but just note that this introduces super sampling, so it's taking something like a 6K image and it's squashing it down to your display resolution, which can in some cases cause some artifacting. This however does introduce an anti-aliasing effect to the image that can smooth out some jaggies. The last two tweaks that I recommend is setting anisotropic filtering to 16 times no matter your computer specs, and then blending accuracy to at least high. The higher you set this, the more performance impact it's going to cost you. I do recommend setting this to the highest maximum setting if you can handle it, but then just go down one by one. The PCSX2 devs recommend that this game be set to high, which is why I'm recommending that as a minimum here. Also, I noticed after setting these that there was this white ghosting effect around Spider-Man that can especially be seen when you're swinging around. Now, the very last big thing that we want to do is check out what renderers work best for this game. If you hate the upscaling and want a more authentic feel, then go with software mode without a doubt. This has so many obvious downsides, since you are viewing this low-res image on a modern digital display, but if all you care about is the utmost accuracy, then this is the way to go. For most of you out there though, you'll want to go with Vulkan. This is going to give you the best performance, but OpenGL and Direct3D will give you more accurate results. And since for most games, for me, I can run OpenGL fine, then I tend to go with that option over Vulkan just to make sure that I'm getting a more accurate representation. Now I could show you graphs and performance stats between all the renderers, but the truth is that it's going to be completely different on every single system, so I don't feel that's going to benefit you. Just go with Vulkan if you care about performance, OpenGL if you want a little bit more accuracy, and then lastly, software mode if you want it to look exactly how it did. Now in terms of visual enhancements like texture packs, we are pretty out of luck here unfortunately. Only the UI and font has been able to be upscaled by the community. This does make the UI look extremely clean though, so it's not all bad. It's just a shame that this version was stuck with these super low res textures that now stick out due to the high internal resolution. The same can't be said for the GameCube version running on Dolphin though. Despite PCSX2 catching up to it, Dolphin has been my go-to way to play this game over the years. The performance on this one is so smooth. And then piling on the benefits, the visuals are way better too. There's an overall bump in fidelity, with textures looking slightly more sharp, and most noticeably, the LOD on some of the background details such as these buildings are way less harsh, with overall draw distance being better. On the PS2 version, these buildings are just blocks, whereas here, you can slightly define that they have some texture to them, and the same goes for the trees in this shot. The only issue is the sky texture has always been bugged for me in this version, which does take away a bit from the positives that we've been talking about. I'm not sure if this is just bugged for me, or it's bugged like this on original hardware, but honestly, for years this texture has looked like this. Anyway, Dolphin has a tremendous amount of settings, and to cut it short, here are the settings that I landed on, so just copy these to get the results that you're seeing in this video. Also, if you right click your game, go Properties and then AR Codes tab, you can add 16:9 widescreen support as well as a 60 FPS patch by copying the codes that you see on screen here. And just like PCSX2, I'd also recommend that you overclock the CPU to the max setting of 400% if you can. This may cause issues again, so be cautious. Now, like I've hinted at, besides the original native quality of the game being overall better, we can also apply some textures here. The entire game has been upscaled thanks to the Spider-Man 2 RE mod. This really does speak for itself, and in terms of getting the best looking game possible quickly, this is going to be the way to go. It also fixes the sky bug that we mentioned as well. I couldn't verify this, but looking at the textures up close, the majority of them do look upscaled rather than by hand or remade, but there were exceptions to this rule, like, for example, the rooftop textures I believe have been replaced here as they do not match the original colour. Some billboards have also been replaced entirely. As well as improving the textures, this mod is chock full of options. For example, there are tons of different controller layout button options. There's 4 different webbing styles that you can choose from, loads of different HUD elements from loads of different games, as well as the one that was showed at E3. And then most importantly, suit mods. Even though it's not implemented seamlessly in the gameplay, it's really nice that we can quickly swap out different costumes, as in the original, this was one of the Spider-Man games that does not have any alternate costumes. These are actually really well made as well. Some of my favourites here was the Spectacular Spider-Man suit, TASM 2, the MCU one, and of course there's both Spider-Man 1 and 2 versions of the Raimi suit. In terms of the Spider-Man 2 suits, there's actually quite a few that you can choose from, and if you really want to stick to the original look of the game, you can also replace it with the Xbox version of the suit, which is just a higher res version of the original than the PS2 or GameCube version. Since this version was looking like a really strong candidate in terms of the visuals, I also applied some reshade effects here. Unfortunately, after the compression of me rendering it out and then further compression on YouTube's part, you're never really going to see the difference between this, so you're just going to have to trust me on this one. The download link will be in the description. It's really easy and straightforward to set up, but if you're confused, there is going to be a guide on that download link to help you out. Now, even if we ignore the texture pack entirely, I still think overall it's slightly ahead of the PS2 version. When I was quickly switching between both versions, I just had more fun playing the GameCube version, and the texture pack only heightened that enjoyment. There was, however, a visual bug that I noticed with the game when you go into reflex mode. This mechanic is a power resource that you build up by doing stuff in the game, and once you've built up enough of it, you can activate it by pressing up on the D-pad, giving you a short period of slowed down time in order to make enemy attacks easier to dodge and counter. This effect adds this really bright white overlay to everything, whereas the GameCube version, this effect is very, very light and almost non-existent. And I'm going to be honest, if this truly is a bug and is not as intended, I actually prefer it. And if we bring in the Xbox version and look at them all side by side, I do still think that the GameCube version is the best, but it is the odd one out here, so I don't think it's as intended. Do let me know in the comments though if I'm wrong here. That's basically everything that I feel is important to note about these two versions, but the next one that we're going to look at is far superior in almost every way, but it's really let down by one big factor, and that's the Xbox version running on the XEMU emulator. Right out the gate, you can instantly see just how sharper the visual representation is here. Spidey's suit is looking sharper, colors and contrast pop a little bit more, and effects like the glow on these windows here at nighttime look the best on the Xbox version. There are also some new effects added as well, like this pretty cool ghosting effect during combat to really exaggerate Spider-Man's speed. Across all three, this is definitely the best graphics-wise. There's no real contest here. However, since XEMU is a little bit less robust of an emulator, our options are quite limiting. For starters, widescreen support is possible, but it isn't as simple as a one-click solution like the others. So let me show you quickly how to set that up. So the first thing you're going to need is extract-xiso. This is in order to take the ISO version of Spider-Man 2 and turn it into a folder that we can patch with the widescreen. So just go to releases on the right here and download the Win64 release. Now all you have to do when you have these two files here is just drag the ISO onto the extract-xiso.exe, and then it will begin to extract all the files into its own folder. So now once that's done, you'll have this folder, and in here the XBE is the thing that we're going to be applying the widescreen patch to. And to get that widescreen patch, you're going to come to this page, and the one that we're looking for is Esperal, this one here. And then inside of that, you're just going to scroll down to find Spider-Man 2. Now here, just click this little download button in the top right. Then once that's downloaded, go to this page, which is the thing that we're going to use in order to patch it. So press choose file for the patch file, and then choose the patch that we just downloaded. And then press choose file on game file, and here we're going to be selecting the default.xbe that we pointed to earlier. Now press apply patch. That'll be done pretty quickly, and you'll get this patched.xbe file. Now all we're going to do with this patched XBE file is drag it into the folder with the default XBE, delete the default XBE or back it up if you're careful, and then rename this one to default. Now move away the ISO file that was here before so that you just have extract-xiso and Spider-Man 2 world folder with the patched XBE in it, and then right click the empty space and click open terminal. Now inside this terminal you just want to paste this command that I'm going to link in the description. Once you've pasted it, just press enter. Again, rename the pasted command to your folder name if it's different from mine. And now to actually load the game, just go to machine, load disk, double click the ISO that we made, and then it should reset itself, although sometimes you might have to do it manually by clicking machine and then reset. Unfortunately, there wasn't any 60 FPS patch that I could find, so we're stuck with 30 here. You can, however, use lossless scaling if you really need that 60 FPS, but going from 30 to 60 isn't going to look that great with FrameGen. And I tried this out, and even still, the game just feels incredibly choppy even with this increase in frame rate. And in terms of settings, there really isn't much that you can play with. I'd recommend that you set the renderer to Vulkan and then use OpenGL if there's any visual bugs, and then set the resolution scale to something like 3 or 4 times for a sharper image on modern displays. And obviously, aspect ratio, set that to 16:9 in order to take advantage of the widescreen patch. Things were looking pretty good for this version until I got to actually playing it. The audio during combat gets incredibly distorted for some reason. And turning on the only option in the audio settings that I hoped would fix it did nothing. There are also some visual bugs that I could instantly notice. There was some popping up in the cutscenes and when swinging around. Overall, it's just kind of a letdown because this version could easily be the best version, but hopefully with time, XEMU can, pick up the pace and catch up in development, because if you combined this level of quality from this version with the polish of the other emulators, you would by far have the best experience. That brings us to the final overview and pros and cons of this video, where we take everything that we've learned and try to get our answer on what is the best way to play. and first up is PCSX2. Despite Dolphin being a really strong contender, I do think that there is a case for this version, as it's definitely the most easiest and most accessible to play of the bunch. I think when you purely lock it down to what's the easiest way to play this game, then PCSX2 is arguably the most smoothest setup experience for those that are new to emulation. Its UI is clean, and it's not overly verbose with its settings like Dolphin is. Also, from my experience using a modern Xbox and DualSense controller, both of them picked up instantly for this emulator and also mapped all of the buttons correctly. Not to mention, all of the patches for this game are instantly updated and they are one-click fixes. There's no messing around with gecko codes or ISO patching. The other big benefit this one has is the classic look, and I know that's kind of weird to say that the worst looking version is somehow a pro, but I know a lot of you out there probably grew up with this version, and so if you play it at native resolution or 720p and put on a CRT shader either in the built-in settings of PCSX2 or through something like Shader Glass, you're going to have a really nostalgic experience. Lastly, performance is pretty good. It might not be the best that I experienced, but it was definitely up there. I also think that PCSX2 might be the hardest version of the game to run out of all these, but I really didn't notice any major slowdowns. Cons are obviously that it's got the worst textures, draw distance, and effect quality of the bunch, so if you want max eye candy, this is not going to be it. There's also no true texture replacement support, so the best we're going to get is a UI upscale, and I really have low hopes that in the future this will get a full upscale because the Dolphin version is just easier to texture replace, so people are naturally just going to do that instead. Dolphin is definitely a step up for me from the PCSX2. It has really good balance of performance and image quality. The draw distance, textures, and effects are all better here. Dolphin also has way more options to play around with, like its output resampling feature that we haven't gone in depth for in this video, but it essentially can give you a really nice hybrid approach where you can play the game at native resolution, but resample it in a way that will give you super crisp pixels or a smoothed image. It's just overall an emulator that is extremely customizable. The texture pack support is obviously a big win for this one as well. The Upscale project does a really good job at breathing new life into this title, and if you want max visuals, then this is definitely the version to go for. Performance also was the smoothest out of all of them here. I was running DirectX 3D with hybrid Uber shaders, and if you're curious about why, it's because the devs recommend DirectX 3D for those of you on Windows and with an Nvidia card, just because it's the most efficient renderer in this case in order to utilize the hybrid Uber shaders. I also set them to compile before launch in order to get rid of any stuttering whilst they compile. And it doesn't get rid of all stuttering, but in minutes, the shaders were basically all loaded in, and it made the game feel incredibly smooth. Cons though is that it's definitely got an ever so slightly different look to it. I didn't mention this in the comparisons, but it somewhat does have a overall sterile or clean look in comparison, but that's only natively. Once you add the texture pack, everything seems to get a lot better. It's also not as plug and play. As someone that absolutely loves emulation, Dolphin is one for me that just never really clicks. It's not as intuitive as PCSX2. The emulator is extremely customizable, but kind of at its own detriment, as the settings seem to go on forever and can get confusing. Also, the controller mapping system is not as smooth and can be a headache. It's not a terrible emulator, don't get me wrong, it's actually one of the best out there, but it's just not quite the smooth, easy experience that PCSX2 is, so for anyone where this is going to be their first ever time emulating, it might be a bit daunting. And then last but kinda least is XEMU. It definitely looks the best natively. Higher res textures, draw distance, everything, it clears. But that's really where it ends. The only other pro that I can really give it is that the options, whilst limiting, do make it easier to understand, and the UI is incredibly straightforward and easy to use. But for cons, the performance is just okay. 30 FPS feels really choppy, and even with lossless scaling, it doesn't really get that much smoother. There are minor visual bugs as well that I couldn't get rid of no matter what renderer I chose, and it made buildings flicker during swinging and textures pop in during cutscenes. The audio is another con as well, where it's just extremely buggy and broken. Lastly, it's just overall a bit of a headache to set up. doing all of that work to get widescreen working, and then the way that XEMU requires that you convert your ROMs to xISO formats really does stain the experience, and it's just not plug and play. Therefore, overall, I'm pretty confident in just recommending the GameCube version running on the Dolphin emulator with the mentioned texture pack. This is by far the most fun and enjoyment overall that I've had out of this game in years, especially with those custom suits. The performance is snappy, the visual's amazing, and there really wasn't any bugs that I could really spot. Also, if you really want that PS2 experience, you can just replace the textures with the PS2 buttons like we mentioned, and then also change the controls inside Dolphin to match the PS2 controls, making the game basically just feel like you're playing the PS2 version anyway. And speaking of that PS2 version, if you want the retro experience, then just play the P6X2 version. If that's what you grew up with, then it's the one you're going to enjoy. So play that, and like I said, put on a CRT shader, just have some fun with it. Just however, avoid the Xbox version at all costs. Whilst it's the best in terms of visuals, it's just let down in every other way. I do wonder though, if we tried all of these on original hardware, whether maybe the Xbox one would come out on top, as it seems to be the best, but since we're talking about PC and emulating here, it's just a no-go. And that basically concludes this episode of Best Way to Play. If it helped you out or you just found it entertaining, make sure to like the video and also get subscribed so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. Also, massive thank you to the Patreons that are on screen right now. It is by far the best way to support me and what I do here on this channel. And to say thank you, it's going to give you loads of perks, such as obviously being here on the screen at the end of the video, but also weekly behind the scenes content so that you're the first one to see what I'm working on and what's coming next for the channel. Besides that, you get a special role in my Discord to show off your supporter status. Speaking of, the Discord is going to be linked down in the description if you want to join. Over there you can expect things like community events where we play some games together, as well as a way to chat to people with similar interests, including myself. And if you have any games that you specifically want me to cover, or just overall video ideas, then the video suggestions channel is going to be the best place to put those. I check that channel as well as the Discord overall daily, so it's going to be overall the best way to get your ideas seen. If you liked this episode of Best Way to Play, then how about you check out my other Spider-Man episodes that are on screen now. See you over there.